Ooh, yeah. Lately I really have had this dream of having a match with all really tall women in it. Has really been a thing I'd love to see happen just because there are so few of us in wrestling, but like something like you have to be 5'10" to enter.
Women's Wrestling Talk, the #1 women's wrestling show on the planet.
What is up, everyone? Welcome to Women's Wrestling Talk, the #1 women's wrestling show on the planet. Of course, your senior writer and host here, Nikki Bougie. And of course, we are always have nothing but the best guest. And today we have a pleasure of speaking to Freya the Slayer. How are you doing?
Hi, I'm doing great today. How are you?
I'm good. Where are you located?
Right now I'm in Louisville, Kentucky.
Oh, wow. Awesome. I'm not far from there. I actually just recently went to Louisville for the Derby City Wrestling show out there. I'm in Nashville myself. So, how's the weather in Louisville?
It's actually pretty nice today. We're finally trying to have some summer.
Yes. Now I love summer. I need the hot weather. I'm tired of the cold. Now before we get into, of course, all things wrestling, I have a few icebreaker questions that I want to ask you. So of course we all love to travel, and so what are a few songs that you keep on repeat?
Ooh, good question. I think it switches up depending on the road trip.
Mm-hmm.
But right now, let me see. Either like YSL, I think would be the one that I've been feeling lately. Just
Okay.
some like European Afro beats. I feel
Nice.
like are summer to a T.
Okay, nice. Now, speaking of vacation, where are some of your favorite destination spots?
Ooh, I think I'm a West Coast girl at heart, so I really love Vegas, honestly. It's one of my favorite cities.
Wow. What do you love about Vegas the most?
I don't know. I think it's just I'm from a really small town in Alaska, and
Hmm.
so it's the complete opposite. I just like that you can find anything there. And
Wow.
it's like anything you're looking for, I feel like you could find in Las Vegas. Even if you're not into like gambling and shows, like
Yeah.
the food's phenomenal. If you're into sushi, best sushi I've ever had.
Okay, I would take that in mind because I haven't been to Las Vegas, but I want to go, and so I definitely, and I'm not a big gambler either.
Mhm.
And I think it's somewhere you go to do that. But I'm glad you said that. With that being said, of course, with travel, when we're growing up, we see different celebrities, different things. Did you have a celebrity crush growing up, and who was it?
Did I have a celebrity crush? Yeah, I probably had a few. I think the earliest one I can remember would have been Lenny Kravitz, if I'm honest.
That's a good one.
Yeah, I don't know if you saw that music video of him where he like drops a towel and walks away, but
Yes,
that was
the infamous.
yes,
The
yes.
infamous.
Burns
Yeah,
in my memory.
I love that. Now, Halloween is one of my favorite holidays, so I have to ask, did you have a favorite costume growing up or even in your adult life, any costumes that were very memorable?
I think the costume that I've repeated the most would be Bjork and the swan dress. I have recreated that thing like 4 times for different Halloweens.
Awesome. Awesome. I love that. And then lastly, of course, if you had any superpower, what would it be?
Teleportation. I
Mm,
hate flying.
really?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I would prefer it to a really long car trip, but I just don't,
Yeah.
I like traveling, like getting to a new location, but the process of getting there, I'm not a fan of.
Okay, that's fair. Well, of course, this is women's wrestling talk, so we have to get into some wrestling. Let us know what got you into wrestling and talk about some of your early inspirations.
Um, so I was living in Alaska at the time, and wrestling was not very big there at all. And so when I got started, it was kind of just like as a hobby, something to do in my free time. But the more I did it, the more I really, really loved it. And that's kind of I actually lived in Las Vegas after I left Alaska to wrestle there. But my earliest inspirations in wrestling were Bull Nakano, Awesome Kong, China, just other big, strong, powerful women.
Absolutely. And speaking of big, strong, powerful women, who have been some of your toughest opponents thus far, you would say?
Ooh, I think lately I've wrestled Kylan King a few times in the last month, and I would say she's definitely formidable. And then I was in a 9-woman scramble at the um, Squared Circle Expo, and that had like Steph DeLander in it, and Allison Kay and Marty Bell, and so that was just full of tough opponents.
Now, you bring up a lot of amazing women in the industry. Are there a few women that you're looking at right now that possible are dream matches for you? I know a big one for a lot of people has been Mercedes Monet since she decided to, go into the New Japan route. And so, do you have any other people that just come to mind first and foremost of dream matches?
Ooh, yeah. Lately I really have had this dream of having a match with all really tall women in it. Has really been a thing I'd love to see happen just because there are so few of us in wrestling, but like something like you have to be 5'10" to enter. And so I just love that, like a nice big girl match because you just don't see it that often. And so I would love to see like JesSICka Havoc, Kamille. There's just a lot of really strong, powerful women that we don't normally get to face each other. And so it's just a different kind of matchup than we regularly have.
I absolutely love that. Now, you speak of Kamille, who's the current NWA World Women's Champion. You have Deonna Purrazzo, who's the current Impact Knockouts World Champion. So many different champions from AEW to WWE. Is there anyone in particular that you have had your eyes set on and wanting to face?
Um, yes, all of the above. But even though she's my girl right now, Shalance Royale has the OVW women's title, which I've held twice. And so even though, that's my wrestling bestie, she's got to watch her back because I'm looking for to be the 3-time OVW women's champion.
Absolutely. Speaking of her, she has been doing a lot of dominance with that OVW championship. Let us know what you would do differently as champion if you did and will receive that 3-time championship reign.
Oh, that's a good question. I think the biggest thing I would want to do is trying to travel with it and face different sorts of opponents and really put more notoriety on it. I mean, she's definitely been killing it. But I think a lot of people don't really watch OVW. And so anything I could do to bring more eyes to that product.
Speaking of that, so we see certain promotions not get as many eyes as obviously ones who are televised. How important is that to get those eyes on those promotions, and how do you execute that as a wrestler?
That's a good question. I think the biggest thing people need to know is how you can watch a product. And so I always try to put out that we're live for free on Fight TV every Thursday. But if you didn't know that, even though you can watch our weekly TV for free, you're not going to. And so I think it's important if you're wrestling on a show is to let the fans know how they can watch it if they can't be there in person.
Absolutely. And I think it's important to support all wrestling. I know we do post shows here for WWE AEW, but we're also doing Impact Wrestling and WOW and other promotions as well. Me, myself, I try to travel to different promotions like Derby City. I haven't gotten to OVW yet, but I will. And then I've also traveled to PW Revolver as well. And I really enjoy the intimacy that brings a lot of people together with smaller promotions. So I talk about what you love the most about smaller promotions and how you plan to change the dynamic and how it's shown to a broader audience.
I think the one thing with smaller venues and promotions is you can really connect with the fans more. When you're in a big stadium show, it's just a crowd of people, not a crowd of individuals. But when you are wrestling in front of these smaller, more intimate um, groups of people, you can really make eye contact with people, come back to the same person, interact with them throughout the show. And I just really like that aspect of it.
Yeah, me too. It's very engaging and it's also very rewarding to see everything that goes into it with production and planning and ring ability and ring gear too. So I have to ask, where do you get some of your inspiration when it comes to ring gear and just being creative in the ring?
I think lately I've been really trying to work with the gear makers. And so I think when we can have a collaboration between kind of what I have in mind and then what they have in mind, that's when we come up with the best, artistic, creative, unique gear. And so I always kind of have something in mind of what I want, but I like really talking to the gear maker and seeing what they have in mind as well.
Absolutely. And speaking of that, because it obviously takes a lot of time to have gear, get gear made, have designs and stuff like that. Off the topic of wrestling, are there any hidden talents or any hobbies that you have outside of wrestling, outside the ring?
I actually used to sew my own gear, and so that is something that I have done in the past. I really have a lot of respect for gear makers because it takes forever. And so that is definitely a hobby that I have on top of graphic design. Before I got into wrestling, it seems like all of the different skills I had really helped me in wrestling now, like being able to sew, being able to do design on the computer and stuff like that.
Absolutely. And that takes a lot of time and effort too. And since the pandemic and since the growth of social media, the conversation of mental health has been really driven in the wrestling community. So, talk about its importance to you and how important it is to be educated on our mental health, especially in a field like wrestling.
I think you really just need to be conscious of how you're feeling because once you start going and wrestling, you just feel like you have to keep going. Like you can't take a break. As soon as you start feeling like you have momentum, you don't want to stop. And sometimes you really do need to take some time for yourself. And so I think just being aware of yourself and how you're feeling is really important.
How hard is it to be in a field of a sport that is 365 days? And how do you cope with that being in that level of competitiveness?
It's really funny. I had this conversation with Sunny Kiss a few months ago, and we were saying, it's funny because yes, right, love. But when you're not getting booked a lot, you're like, man, why does nobody love me? Why am I not getting booked? But then when you're booked a lot, you're like, sheesh, I just need a break. And so it's just funny to try to find that balance between, wanting to work all the time, but also knowing, okay, sometimes maybe I do need to take a couple days.
Absolutely. And how important is it to make sure we are doing self-care during those breaks? And what do you do when what are a few things that you make sure you do to ensure that your mental health, but also just your living life? What are some things that you do on those days off out of the ring?
For me, I've been really trying to still stick to my schedule, like not just lay around and do absolutely nothing. Because for me, I can easily just be a slug and not do a damn thing. And so, even if I am relaxing, still try to go to the gym, still try to eat at least decently well, and trying to maintain kind of consistency for myself, I think really helps.
Absolutely. Now, I believe that consistency is the key. Before we get out of here, I want to know, I have to ask, why are you the one to watch in 2023?
I think that a big thing is when you're unexpected. I knew that when I left from Alaska, I was the only female wrestler out of the state, and I was only one of 11 people. And so when you've got someone who is a complete unknown, you don't know what to expect. And I think I've still got a lot of things up my sleeves that I have not even brought to the table yet. And so, you always got to keep your eye on what you don't know because it can always get you.
Wow, that's a good I need to write that down because that's good. That's something to think about. Well, of course, we want to thank you here at Women's Wrestling Talk for joining us here. We will be watching to see what's next, and we can't wait to see. And let everyone know where they can follow you on your social media handles.
You can find me on Instagram at Freya_the_Slaya or on Twitter at the same thing. So if you just search Freya the Slaya, you can find me there, Facebook, all the biggies.
Absolutely. And you can catch us on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, TikTok, all the social media handles, WW Talk Pod, and of course at www.talkpod.com. I'm Nikki Bougie. This is Women's Wrestling Talk, the number one women's wrestling show on the planet.
Women's Wrestling Talk, the number one women's wrestling show on the planet. Women's Wrestling Talk, the number one women's wrestling show on the planet.